They remembered to remove me from the will, but not to wish me a happy birthday. My 90th birthday. A whole 9 decades on this earth. And not a single phone call. Not a card. Not even a measly text from the grandkids I raised like they were my own. But the same week my husband was lowered into the cold ground, they had the paperwork ready. My name, scratched off the family like I was gum under their shoe. And the worst part, I found out while standing over his grave, holding the birthday cupcakes I baked for myself. I stood there, wind whipping at my silver blonde curls, candles still unlit in the box I held. The cemetery was quiet, too quiet for someone who had given so much. I glanced at the empty space beside me where my son, Michael, was supposed to be. He promised he'd pick me up. Said he wanted to make this birthday special after the funeral. He never showed. Instead, my lawyer did. She stepped out of her car with hesitation, clutching an envelope. "Mrs. Hampton," she said gently, "I didn't want you to find out like this, but your name has been removed from the estate registry." I blinked. "What?" The box of cupcakes dropped. Frosting smeared across my black funeral shoes. The wind caught the napkin with the number 90 scribbled in pink marker and blew it into the grave beside the fresh mound. My husband hadn't been gone for 5 days. And suddenly, I was no longer part of the family legacy. My name is Martha Rose Hampton, and I'm a retired nurse who spent 45 years at St. Agnes Hospital in Missouri. I've delivered babies, held the hands of the dying, and wiped more tears than I can count. My husband, Charles, was a World War II veteran, strong and kind. We built a life together. We didn't have much, but we made sure our only son, Michael, never went without. Michael, my boy with the blue eyes and thick glasses. He used to call me Super Mom. He would bring me wildflowers from the roadside when he was 8, saying I deserved better than roses from the store. But somewhere along the way, that boy turned into a man I could barely recognize. Especially after he married her, Tammy. A woman with a grin too sharp to be real and perfume that clung to the walls like mildew. She never liked me. Said I was old-fashioned and in the way. And when Charles got sick, well, that's when things started to slide. I cared for Charles for the last 7 years of his life. Alzheimer's is cruel. Some days he thought I was his sister. Other days he begged me not to leave him alone in the house because the Nazis were coming. I changed his diapers, fed him by hand, sang to him when he cried. Michael barely visited. "Work's been crazy, Mom," he'd text. Or worse, Tammy would answer on his behalf. "Michael's under pressure right now. Maybe next weekend." But the weekends never came. And when Charles passed, I didn't even get to ride in the family car. Tammy said, "We've already got the seats filled. The nurse can take her." I sat in a rental, alone, behind the black SUV carrying my husband's body. Still, I didn't complain. Not until my birthday. Not until that letter. My lawyer explained that, according to the new paperwork, the family house, which Charles and I paid off together in the 80s, was now under Michael and Tammy's name. The accounts we built for our grandchildren's future. Reassigned. Even the lake cabin Charles built with his bare hands was signed over to them, for ease of management. But he never would have signed that, I said in disbelief. My lawyer, God bless her, gave me a sad smile. He didn't. The signatures don't match. But unless we contest, it'll stand. Hit me like a punch to the ribs. They waited until he was gone. Waited until the woman who had held that family together was too tired to fight. They'd bet on me being quiet, broken, lone. But something inside me, something I thought died with Charles, rose like a tide. I wasn't going to be erased like an old bill. They may have taken my name off the will, but they forgot who built that legacy. That night, I pulled out the old safe key Charles gave me before his memory left him for good. He whispered back then, "If anything happens to me, go to the floorboard under the cabin sink." I had never opened it before. But now, with tears crusted on my cheeks and betrayal burning in my chest, I knew. It was time. The moonlight followed me as I drove to the lake cabin, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, but my mind sharp as a tack. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and every bump on the gravel road rattled my bones. I hadn't been here in nearly a decade, not since Charles's diagnosis. He used to say this was the only place where the world stood still. Now it felt like the only place I could truly move again. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. Dust covered the wooden floor like a blanket. The air was stale, the kind that clings to loneliness. But the structure was still strong, like the memories of the man who built it. I made my way to the kitchen, slowly knelt by the sink, and pried up the floorboard. My knees ached something awful, but I kept going. There it was. A rusted metal lockbox, just as Charles had described. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside, wrapped in faded fabric, were two things. A thick stack of documents, bound in rubber bands, and a small tape recorder with a handwritten label that read, "Play me, Rosie." I sat down right there on the cold wood and pressed play. Charles's voice filled the tiny cabin, hoarse but steady. "If you're listening to this, Rosie, I'm gone. And if I know my brother's son right, he's already trying to take everything from you. But I've made sure you're not left with nothing. Not after what we built. Not after all you've done for me. Inside this box are the original title deeds, bank documents, and the trust one set up in your name. You're the sole owner of everything. They don't know that because I had the lawyer draw up decoys for appearances. But this is the real deal. Don't let them take what's yours. Not after all your sacrifices." I couldn't breathe. He knew. He had known all along that Michael would come for everything. He protected me the only way he could, quietly, like always. And suddenly, I wasn't just a forgotten widow anymore. I was the legal owner of everything they thought they'd stolen. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, holding the documents, replaying Charles's message over and over. His voice was the only thing keeping my heart from breaking completely. By morning, the ache in my chest had turned into resolve. I drove straight to Linda Cohen, the lawyer Charles had worked with privately. She blinked when she saw the documents. "My God, these are the originals." She pulled out her files and quickly compared signatures, seals, dates. "Martha, if this is what it looks like, then they've committed fraud. These override anything they filed last week." She smiled, a fierce, proud smile I hadn't seen on anyone in months. "We can file an injunction immediately. Freeze all assets, stop the transfer, and make them explain themselves before a judge." I nodded, silent. But inside I was roaring. That afternoon I went back to the main house. My house. Michael was on the porch, shirtless, sipping from a beer bottle. He didn't even stand up. "Mom, you okay?" he asked with fake concern. "You didn't answer your phone yesterday." I just looked at him. That same boy who used to cry when he lost a toy. Now grown into a man who could steal from his mother without blinking. "I came to get some of my things," I said calmly. Tammy appeared at the door. "Can you give us a heads up next time, Martha? We've been trying to clean up since the funeral." Clean up. Like I was a mess they couldn't wait to sweep out of their lives. I nodded, playing it cool. "Of course." But as I passed by them I couldn't help but whisper, "You might want to check the mail in the next few days." Tammy scoffed. "Is that a threat?" I looked her dead in the eye. "No, sweetheart. It's a notice." 3 days later, a courier delivered the court documents to their front door. Michael ripped it open on the porch while Tammy stood behind him. And then his voice cracked. "She's freezing the accounts," he shouted. "She can't do that. We're already closing escrow on the cabin." Tammy's face was drained of color. She still owns everything." I watched from across the street, parked in my car, windows rolled up. And I smiled for the first time in weeks. The next morning my phone rang before sunrise. I was still in my nightgown, sipping weak coffee and watching birds peck at my garden when I picked it up. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Michael's voice was shrill, like a child denied dessert. "You froze everything. Do you even know what you're doing? Tammy and I have bills, closing dates. What am I supposed to tell the realtor?" I waited a beat before replying. Tell them the truth. That you tried to steal from your mother. And you got caught. He went silent. That silence had weight in it, like a child realizing for the first time that actions had consequences. Then he muttered, You'll regret this. I almost laughed. I already did, Michael. The day I gave you power of attorney. Weeks passed. Linda, my lawyer, filed formal fraud charges. A temporary injunction was placed on all estate assets, which meant Michael and Tammy could not sell the house, the cabin, or touch the trust accounts until a full investigation was complete. Tammy's friends began to whisper. Her social media, where she once posted family-first quotes and photos of my husband's medals, went quiet. One of her friends, Janice, came by the thrift shop where I volunteered and whispered, I always thought she was off, Martha. I'm so sorry. I just nodded. I was done trying to fix people's opinions. But the real twist came one morning when I got a visit from Ben, my grandson. He was always quiet as a boy. Curious kind, but in recent years he'd grown distant. I chalked it up to teenage life and Tammy's poison. But now he stood on my porch in a faded hoodie, holding something in his hand. Grandma, he said, can we talk? He stepped inside, looking smaller than I remembered. I didn't know what they were doing until I overheard them last week, he said, voice trembling. They were bragging about how you wouldn't last long, and how they'd swoop in and take everything. They even joked about putting you in a nursing home and selling your jewelry before the estate even settled. My stomach twisted, but I kept my face calm. He reached into his hoodie and pulled out his phone. I recorded them. He pressed play. Tammy's voice came through loud and sharp. She's 90. She's basically expired milk. Once the paperwork clears, I'm getting marble counters and gutting that ugly cabin. Michael chuckled. We'll put her in that cheap place near the highway. She won't know the difference. She's probably halfway senile anyway. Closed my eyes. I wasn't just forgotten. I was discarded. But not by everyone. Because Ben, the boy I raised on oatmeal and bedtime stories, had come back. He looked ashamed. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I put my hand on his. You came right when I needed you. That tape was gold. My lawyer submitted it as supporting evidence. The court now had a motive, a timeline, and proof of malicious intent. Things moved fast after that. Tammy's real estate deal fell through. Michael's accounts were flagged. And best of all, the court ruled that my documents, the originals Charles left me, would take precedence until the full trial. The judge said it clearly. This court will not tolerate elder exploitation. But the real explosion came at the emergency hearing. Michael and Tammy sat at the front row, dressed like butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. Michael turned to the judge. Your Honor, she's confused. She's elderly and grieving. I don't think she knows what she's saying. I believe she may be mentally unfit. Tammy piped up. She's been forgetful. We were just trying to help. Understood. Straight back. I may be 90, but I am not confused. I remember giving birth to the boy who now sits here and calls me senile. The judge raised a brow. I continued. If I'm so forgetful, how did I remember to bring this? I handed Linda the thumb drive with the recording. The courtroom played the audio. One of the clerks covered her mouth. The judge leaned back, frowning deeply. Michael buried his face in his hands. Tammy looked like she wanted to melt into her seat. The judge slammed the gavel once. We will reconvene to review full charges of fraud and elder abuse. Then she turned to Michael and Tammy. Until then, I strongly suggest you find separate legal counsel. Outside the courtroom, Ben squeezed my hand. You were amazing, Grandma. I smiled faintly. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But they forgot. I was a war nurse. I've seen worse. The headlines hit the local papers before I even made it back home. Elder abuse allegations rock prominent local family. Beneath it, a grainy photo of Michael and Tammy leaving the courthouse, looking like two children who got caught stealing from the cookie jar. And the cookie jar had teeth. The neighborhood buzzed. People who once waved at Tammy with forced politeness now avoided eye contact. Michael's law firm removed his name from the website the next day. And me. I finally slept through the night. But peace didn't last long. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of tires screeching in front of my home. I peeked through the curtains and saw Tammy, standing on my lawn in her bare feet, mascara streaked, holding a paper in her hand. She pounded the door. "Open this door, Martha. I need to talk to you." I considered ignoring her. But something in me, call it closure or just curiosity, made me open the door. She didn't wait for an invitation. Tammy barged in, waving a letter. "You froze everything. Do you have any idea what you've done? They're coming after us with criminal charges now." She looked around my modest living room with disgust, like she couldn't believe someone could live with crocheted pillows and photo albums instead of wine fridges and granite counters. I stayed calm. "You mean what you and Michael did to me?" "That's exactly what I intended." Tammy's face twisted. "I told him this would happen. I told him not to mess with that old safe. But he said you were too weak to fight." And there it was. The truth. Outside in the shadows, Michael stood with something in his hand. Crowbar. And a wild look in his eyes. Ben stepped back from the window like he'd seen a ghost. I took one look at my son, my former son, standing there in the dark, gripping a crowbar, and I knew. This wasn't about money anymore. It was revenge. Michael wanted to hurt me. Physically, emotionally, it didn't matter anymore. He was unraveling and I had to act fast. "Go to the back," I whispered to Ben. "Call 911 from your phone. Lock the door behind you. Don't come out until the police arrive." He hesitated. "Go," said louder this time. I ran. And I, 90-year-old Martha Rose Hampton, with a spine full of arthritis and knees that crack like popcorn, walked to the front door and bolted it. Michael began pounding. "Open the door." His voice was wild, like an animal cornered. "You're ruining everything. That money was supposed to be mine. I earned it, taking care of Dad, putting up with you." I didn't respond. Let him scream. I walked back to the living room, calm as could be, and sat down beside the coffee table where Charles's army knife still lay. He always kept it for emergencies. This wasn't how I imagined spending my 91st year. But then again, I never imagined my own flesh and blood would try to rob me, erase me, and threaten me with a crowbar. That boy I gave everything to. He was gone. Only the coward remained. Then the pounding stopped. For a second I thought maybe he left. But then I heard the crack, a side window shattering. He was trying to break in. I grabbed the knife and held it to my chest. Not to use it, just to let him know I could. The door burst open moments later. Michael stumbled inside, panting, looking around wildly. "Where is he? Where's Ben?" "I told him to call the police." "You did what?" He stepped forward. "You always take from me. First you took Dad's attention. Then you took my inheritance. You always controlled everything. I'm done being the backup son." I stood up. Slowly. "Michael," I said quietly, "you stopped being my son the moment you chose greed over love." His mouth trembled. Then he lunged. And before he could reach me, flashing lights filled the windows. "Police." He turned around just as officers stormed in, guns raised. "Drop the crowbar." Michael froze. His eyes darted between me and the cops. Then he dropped it with a loud clang and raised his hands. They arrested him right there in my living room. I didn't cry. Not even when they put him in cuffs. But I did whisper something as they walked past me. "You could have had everything, Michael. All I wanted was for you to love me. But now, all I want is for justice to finish what I started." The next few days were a whirlwind. The story exploded. Not just in the papers but online. Son breaks into elderly mother's home after fraud charges. Arrested holding crowbar. The court issued a no-contact order immediately. Michael was charged with attempted burglary, elder intimidation, and resisting arrest. Bail was denied due to the threat level. Tammy tried to do damage control. She appeared on some local podcast crying fake tears, saying things like, "We're just a misunderstood family. We never meant to hurt her." But it backfired. Ben released the full audio tapes to the press. Tammy's voice saying I was expired milk. Freeware. But the real victory came in the courtroom 3 weeks later. I sat in the front row, dressed in Charles's favorite sky blue dress. My cane at my side. My back is straight. Tammy and Michael entered in matching gray suits, court-ordered. Their lawyers didn't even look hopeful. The judge didn't waste time. He read the charges aloud, laid out the evidence, played the voicemail, the threats, the break-in, the fraud. Then he turned to me. "Mrs. Hampton, would you like to make a statement?" I stood slowly, with Ben holding my elbow. I looked right at Michael. "I changed your diapers," I began. "I sat beside your hospital bed when you had that fever at 7. I skipped meals so you could have piano lessons. I gave up everything, retirement trips, my own peace, so you could feel safe. Loved." My voice shook. "But instead of love, you gave me betrayal." I turned to the judge. "I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for justice. Not just for me, but for every elder who's been treated like we're invisible. Like we're just waiting to die." Silence filled the room. The judge nodded. And then he ruled. Full restitution. All assets returned. Criminal sentences pending. But just when I thought it was over, Linda leaned close and whispered, "There's one more thing, Martha. A secret account in Michael's name was just discovered offshore. We suspect it's tied to the missing retirement funds from Charles's pension." My blood ran cold. They were stealing from him. Before he died. Linda nodded. And just like that I realized. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Charles too. And I was going to finish what he started. Charles's eyes in our wedding photo stared back at me from the mantel. He always knew how to smile with his whole face. Like life was still full of hope, even when things went dark. And now, years after his death, I realized the darkness had been creeping in long before I'd noticed. Michael hadn't just stolen from me. He'd stolen from his father too. Linda placed the documents in front of me. The offshore account was opened 8 months before Charles passed. That's when his pension started going missing. I pressed my trembling fingers to my lips. 8 months. Yes. We suspect Michael used his power of attorney to divert funds, thinking Charles would never be lucid enough to catch on. I stared at the papers. There it was in black and white. My husband's name listed as the original beneficiary of a retirement fund, with a sudden change authorized by Michael. And Charles, he had trusted him. Trusted us. "I'm going after every cent," I whispered. Linda nodded. "And we're going to get it back." We filed a motion with the Federal Financial Crimes Unit. Fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, identity manipulation. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was federal. Tammy panicked. I knew because she left a voicemail. Her voice cracked and desperate. "Martha, I didn't know. I thought Michael had full permission. I swear I didn't know it was stolen. Please, I'm begging you. I'm pregnant. I'll lose the baby from the stress. Please don't send me to prison." I didn't call back. Ben did. And he said only one word. "Good." By now, the news outlets had picked up the story nationwide. 90-year-old woman outsmarts her son's financial fraud scheme. Exposes $400,000 offshore theft. I became something I never imagined. A symbol. Local radio hosts started saying my name. Women at the grocery store would pat my shoulder. "You remind me of my mama. She never let anyone push her around either." I wasn't invisible anymore. And I made sure no one like me would be. With Linda's help and Ben's determination, we started forming a legal trust. Hampton Trust for Elder Justice. A non-profit that would help elders like me get legal advice, monitor financial abuse, and feel seen. The bank froze Michael's offshore account. They would hold the funds until after the sentencing. Charles's name was officially restored to the pension account. And more shocking, Linda found a second recording. This one was hidden in an old cassette Charles had stored in the cabin radio. Click play. Rosie, if I forget who you are one day, just know I never forgot what you did for me. You saved me. You saved our family. If something ever happens to you, I hope someone fights for you the way you always fought for us. Sobbed quietly. He had recorded it when Alzheimer's started. Even in his fear, he left me love. And now, I would carry that love into the courtroom and make sure Michael never hurt another soul. Michael sat in a gray suit, thinner now. Tammy clutched her belly and wore no makeup, trying to play the role of innocent wife. The judge was direct. Mr. Hampton, the court finds you guilty of financial fraud, elder exploitation, and embezzlement. Michael's lawyer requested house arrest. Denied. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, with mandatory counseling and restitution orders. Tammy. She received 2 years probation, a permanent record, and a ban from accessing elder accounts. They walked out broken. And I stood up, slowly, and left with my head high. I wasn't just walking out of that courtroom. I was walking into the last chapter of my life on my terms. Back home, I sat with Ben on the porch. The sky was painted in soft oranges and purples. He leaned on my shoulder. You did it, Grandma. Smiled. We did it. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know it's not much, but I thought you deserved to be honored properly this time. Open the box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a tiny pendant that read, 90 and never broken. My eyes welled with tears. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Answered. And a deep voice said, Mrs. Hampton, I'm calling about another account we just discovered. One your husband opened under a different name. It seems he left something behind just for you. The line was quiet for a moment. Then the voice repeated gently, Mrs. Hampton, are you there? I gripped the phone tighter, my heart thudding in my ears. Yes, I whispered. I'm here. What kind of account? The man introduced himself as a senior officer from the bank's legacy division. We were auditing linked pension records after the court ruling when we found an old account under the name Rose Carson. Your maiden name, I believe. My breath caught. Charles opened it almost 12 years ago. It's a trust account. It lists you as the sole beneficiary, activated only upon confirmed fraud against your primary assets. I couldn't speak. Charles had planned for this. He had seen something coming, and he'd left one last lifeline, hidden behind my old name, Rosie, the name he used only when he held my hand during storms. The bank official continued. There's a balance of $380,000. It was funded in portions through his veterans' benefits and secondary pension. It's all yours, Mrs. Hampton. I didn't cry this time. I laughed. Not out of joy but out of release. Like something tight in my chest had finally broken loose. Ben watched me from the porch swing, confused but curious. When I hung up the phone, I turned to him. Your grandfather, I said with a grin, just reached out from heaven with one last gift. A month passed. Michael began his prison sentence. Tammy moved out of state, too ashamed to stay in town. She sent a letter begging me to forgive her, for the baby's sake. I didn't reply. Forgiveness, I believe, isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. And she hadn't earned it. Ben enrolled at the local college, studying social work. He said he wanted to help families like ours avoid the kind of rot that nearly destroyed us. He moved in with me permanently. He even brought his cat. As for me, I used Charles's hidden trust to rebuild the home they nearly stole from me. New curtains, fresh garden, and a ramp on the porch for the women in my new senior circle, many of whom now came to my house on Fridays for tea and legal advice. The Hampton Trust for Elder Justice became official. Our mission: protect the ones they think are too old to matter. We partnered with 3 local law firms, a women's shelter, and even a few retired judges. Word spread. People started calling me Grandma Grit on social media. I didn't understand most of the comments, But Ben assured me they meant well. And then, something I never expected happened. The mayor invited me to speak. "Just say a few words," she said, "for Elder Abuse Prevention Week." I stood on the steps of City Hall, my cane in one hand, Ben beside me, and a sea of people before me. Some were young. Most were gray-haired. Many were crying. Took a breath. And I said, "They forgot my 90th birthday, but remembered to take my name off the will right after my husband's funeral. That was their first mistake. Their second. Thinking I wouldn't fight back." I smiled, letting the crowd settle. Age does not mean absence. Wrinkles do not mean weakness. And silence does not mean surrender. The crowd roared. But I wasn't done. I am not just a widow. Not just a mother. Not just someone in a rocking chair. I am a witness. A warrior. And I'm still standing. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch, the wind tugging at my soft cardigan. I held the gold pendant Ben had given me. 90 and never broken. And I realized something. They tried to erase me. But instead they made me unforgettable. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt discarded, forgotten, or underestimated, let this be your reminder. You're not done. And it's never too late to take your power back. Speech Balloon, leave a comment, share this story, and hit subscribe, because in this community your story matters too.